It is Graham here, Liv'n Dream in October 2022, and welcome to Brooklyn, New York. It is Sunday morning and therefore our first full day here in New York City. You can hopefully see the New York City skyline behind me here in the distance. We've got nothing planned today, so what we're going to do is take Michael and Donna and introduce them to what is Fiona's and my favourite city. So step one is to go and get a metro pass, a 7-day metro pass, and actually the nearest metro station, if you can see it, is just down here behind me. So it's right opposite the apartment here in Fulton Street in Brooklyn. So the plan today is to get a metro into Manhattan. We're going to walk then down to City Hall and then wander across the Brooklyn Bridge, followed by a water taxi back to South Seaport, and then after that I've got no idea, probably go to a pub for some lunch, and then we'll maybe walk the High Line, or we'll just wander up to the reflection pools at the World Trade Centers. We're not sure, but anyway, come and join Fiona, Donna and Michael and I as we enjoy our first day here in New York City. As Fiona, Michael and I waited for Donna, the weather today was the topic of conversation this morning. Because let's face it guys, we're currently in the autumn, or is it the fall? I guess it's really the same thing, but at the end of the day, the weather was going to be fairly changeable this week. But looking at the weather today, on Sunday, it was looking pretty nice, with temperatures getting up into the low 20s, and that is low 70s in American. As a result, I was in shorts and a light fleece this morning, looking forward to the walk ahead. The Magpie Sisters to New York. Yeah, I know guys, as we prepared to leave the apartment, Donna was rather excited because she was going to New York City for the first time in her life, and who can blame her? I remember what that feeling was like back in 1989 when I did it. And of course, on the way down to ground level, Fiona and Donna were preparing their Apple Watches for the step count ahead, because we were planning lots of steps today. And as you could see in the introduction to this episode, the walk from our apartment on Fulton Street here in Williamsburg, New York, to the nearest subway station, which of course was Kingston Northrop, was simply just across the road. I think in all of our recent trips to New York City over the last few years, this was the closest subway station to our Airbnb we had yet. And as you can see, Kingston Northrop is on the Sea Line. And for us, that was both good and bad. It was fantastic that we could get our direct train without changes right up into Midtown Manhattan, but not so great because the Sea Line is a local train and it stops at every station en route, so it does take up to 40 minutes to transit between Kingston Northrop and something like 42nd Street. Right, first things first, we needed to get 4 Metro cards, or should I say 4 7-day Metro cards, which would give Fiona, Donna, Michael and I unlimited access to the subway system here in New York during our stay in October 2022. The cost was $33 plus $1 for the Metro card, so it was exactly the same as it was when we were last in New York in 2019 and then the year before as well. However, from experience, Fiona and I knew that these Metro ticket machines didn't like our UK credit cards, so it was going to be a cash transaction here this morning. So Fiona started the laborious job of inserting the first of $34 in cash. And as you can see guys, it was a bit of a laborious task because quite often the machine rejected some of our notes. And meanwhile, at the next ticket machine, Donna and Michael were doing exactly the same. What you now need to understand, guys, is the New York Metro cards are magnetic strips. They're not RFID tickets like you would get here in the UK or around Europe. And as a result, during the first couple of days of our Virgin New Yorkers adventure, we struggled numerous times to get through the barrier. And as you can see here on Sunday morning, it was my turn to struggle first. And in the end, the very nice lady in the New York Metro booth let me through the gate manually. And I promise, guys, we did get better at this as the week continued. So we took the Sea Line all the way to Chambers Street in downtown Manhattan. Our plan was to find our way around to the front of City Hall and begin our walk eastbound across the Brooklyn Bridge in the direction of Brooklyn, of course. And here we are approaching the front of City Hall, where our walk eastbound across the Brooklyn Bridge begins. And during all of Fiona's and my previous visits to this part of downtown New York, there was always street performers outside the front of City Hall, but not this time. And as a result, I wondered if this was some sort of post-pandemic new normal, or was it just the time of the year? If any of you have got any ideas, please respond in the comment section below. However, one thing that certainly wasn't lacking this morning as we made our way eastbound onto the Brooklyn Bridge was, of course, these street vendors selling all sorts of tourist trinkets. According to Wikipedia, and therefore for those of you who are interested, the walk across the Brooklyn Bridge is 1.1 miles long, or 616 feet in total. To be honest, I can't really remember how long it took us to walk the length of the Brooklyn Bridge because we were stopping all the time to take photographs and video. The construction of the Brooklyn Bridge began in 1869, so 100 years before my year of birth, and back then the project took 14 years, completing in 1883. When it was first opened, the bridge was called the New York and Brooklyn Bridge, but it was renamed in 1915 to the Brooklyn Bridge, and of course that name remains today, where it is the most southerly toll-free crossing for vehicles between Long Island and of course Manhattan Island. During the more than 3 decades that I'd been visiting New York City, this was my third time walking across the Brooklyn Bridge. The first was in 2018 with Fiona and our youngest son Craig, and the second in 2019 when Fiona and I came back to New York to celebrate my 50th birthday. But when I first visited New York back in the late 80s, I drove across this bridge for the first time, entering Manhattan, of course, for the first time, and I was in complete awe at the skyscrapers that were presented in front of me. Of course, the two World Trade Center buildings dominating the New York skyline back then, and I will come back to the World Trade Centers a little bit later on in this episode. As we approached the Brooklyn side of the Brooklyn Bridge, I was under a little bit of pressure this morning because my plan right now was to get back to Manhattan using a river taxi, which Fiona and I last did back in 2018 with our son Craig. However, back in July 2018, we found Brooklyn Park and the water taxi completely by accident. So here in October 2022, it was my job to find the same way down to Brooklyn Park and the water taxi ferry terminal. So as we left the bridge behind us and entered the rabbit warren of residential streets in one of the most densely populated districts of New York City, I was not only feeling the pressure, following my nose and instinct from memories formed 6 years earlier. Opened in 2010, we're now entering what is known as Brooklyn Bridge Park. And as I said previously, Fiona and I found this park totally by accident back in 2018. And as you can see, Brooklyn Bridge Park offers excellent views of downtown Manhattan just across the East River. And just ahead of us was the One Hotel Brooklyn Bridge, which translates into our first stop for coffee this morning.
Different sort of cheese. This is like coffee. There's no alcohol. Promise. It's not even any. It's not even an Irish coffee.
What is it? Is it latte?
And after our well-earned caffeine hit, it was time to find our way back across the East River, because this episode is all about going downtown. And I'm not talking about Petula Clark's 1964 hit, or the complete rubbish independent radio station we were forced to listen to in Northern Ireland growing up in the 70s and early 80s. Because this morning, Sunday, we were going downtown Manhattan. And to get to downtown New York from Brooklyn Bridge Park was fairly easy, because we were going to use one of New York's many river taxis. You purchased tickets for these river ferries at the ticket kiosk next to the ferry terminal itself. And the ferry Fiona, Donna, Michael and I were heading for right now had one stop ahead only, and that was Wall Street in downtown Manhattan. The ferry next to us was of course heading uptown towards Williamsburg. And then for memory, when we last used this river ferry on the 4th of July 2018, the ferry then crossed from Williamsburg to Midtown Manhattan. I'm sorry guys, I can't remember exactly where. This particular ferry crossing between Brooklyn Bridge Park and Wall Street took only about 5 or 6 minutes. And as we approached the Wall Street ferry terminal, we headed back to the front of the ferry indoors, ready to depart. And making our way off the ferry at Wall Street, our next stop was South Seaport. I know that I've been calling this South Seaport, but it's really known as South Street Seaport, and it's adjacent to the downtown Manhattan Financial District, where Fulton Street meets the East River. And this, guys, is my favourite place in New York City, and I've been visiting South Street Seaport on Sunday mornings during nearly every single trip that I've ever made to Manhattan over the decades. And it's home to some of the oldest buildings in New York City, including 19th century mercantile commercial buildings and sailing ships. But for me, visiting New York between the late 1980s and the early 21st century, South Street Seaport was a shopping mall with all of the usual North American brands, including my favourite Sharper Image. It was also home to my favourite coffee shop in this part of downtown Manhattan. I can't remember its name, but it was also one of the best coffee shops in downtown Manhattan that served some of the loveliest, nicest cookies you've ever tasted. Guys, you guessed it, I didn't get this big eating vegetables. But sadly, the South Street Seaport shopping mall was destroyed by Hurricane Sandy in October 2012, so 10 years ago at the time of recording this episode. Fiona and I will be back here on Saturday, our last day in New York City. I did tell you guys that this was my favourite place in New York, so we would be back before going home. But for now, guys, we were starting to get hungry. And as luck had it, Fiona's and my favourite pub in New York was only a few minutes walk away. And here we are, guys, approaching Ryan Maguire's Irish Bar at 28 Cliff Street in downtown Manhattan. And if you'd watched our New York at 50 series recorded back in May 2019, so before the pandemic, you would have seen Fiona and I at this Irish bar more than a few times.
Cheers. So you don't want to know that.
First Irish bar.
I should also point out that the drink here at Ryan Maguire's Bar is some of the best price in New York as well. Eating and drinking in New York can be rather expensive, but I've always thought that Ryan Maguire's offers great quality and great value at the same time.
Shuffle, the Wall Street Shuffle. You're going to be the Michael is your 21st century Wolf of Wall Street.
What's that?
The Wolf of Wall Street. Or is see, there was the other Wolf movie that had what do you call that 80s star, the woman Pfeiffer, Michelle Pfeiffer was the Wolf. That was a brilliant movie.
Remember that one?
Yeah, and then there was the Wolf of Wall Street. That's totally different.
Yep, guys, I think at this point the alcohol just meant we were talking complete shite. But the food and drink was very good. So with our stomachs full, our next destination requires very little introduction. We were making the 10-minute walk towards the One World Trade Centre, also known as the Freedom Tower. We would be visiting the One World Freedom Tower tomorrow and therefore in the next episode. So you know what to do, guys, if you want to continue to follow Fiona, Donna, Michael and I as we enjoy our Virgin New Yorkers adventure in October 2022. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and press the bell icon to be notified when the next video is published. Anyway, back to this episode, and of course Sunday, our first full day here in New York. It was time to take Donna and Michael to the reflection pools. A very sobering reminder of what happened here in New York on Tuesday morning, the 11th of September 2001. Of course, the twin towers that were lost on that terrible day have now been replaced by this incredible building known as the One World Trade Centre or the Freedom Tower. And of course, the two reflection pools are situated on the same footprint of land that used to be occupied by the two World Trade Centre buildings themselves. In my opinion, these reflection pools are the perfect memorial to the near 3,000 people that died here in New York on that terrible Tuesday morning. And these memorials don't just remember those lost in the planes or in the buildings themselves, but also the near 400 first responders that lost their lives trying to save the lives of others. I think visiting these reflection pools makes what happened 21 years ago at the time of recording this episode real for anyone visiting this part of New York for the first time. For the vast majority of the world, watching the events from New York on that terrible Tuesday morning on our television screens was like something out of a horror movie, but a horror movie that was real for New Yorkers. I challenge anyone to visit this site and not feel the emotion. It is a very sobering reminder of the price humanity pays for the freedom we enjoy. But this site is a testament to the strength of the United States, because liberty and freedom, which is actually the title of the next episode, will always prevail. Because out of the devastation of Tuesday, September the 11th, 2001, these new buildings were born. New York and America will always rebuild itself. And the site of the World Trade Centers here in New York is proof in itself that freedom and good will always prevail over evil. And as we arrive at the famous Bull on Wall Street, we are reminded of what those terrorists tried to destroy just over 2 decades earlier. I think at this point on Sunday we should probably have headed back to the apartment in Williamsburg, but we didn't. Instead, we took the decision to jump back on the subway and head north in Midtown towards Times Square, another item on Donna and Michael's bucket list. I'm going to make a confession, guys. I don't like Times Square. For a simple boy from Belfast in Northern Ireland, it is just far too busy for me. And the next stop on our Sunday afternoon walk in Midtown Manhattan was, of course, the Rockefeller Centre. And with it being October, there is no ice on the ice rink yet. And I'm afraid that is it for Sunday and our first full day in New York City. After the Rockefeller Centre, it was time to get back in the subway and head back to our Williamsburg Airbnb. I think by now we were all completely exhausted, but clearly not too exhausted for a game of pool. And this is where I'm going to bring this episode of our Virgin New Yorkers adventure to a close. But before I finish, I'm going to leave you with some photographs that we took throughout the day.